us about your blog and how you got started with it.
Okay, well, my blog is Steff Metal, so www.steffmetal.com, that's Steff with 2 Fs. I started blogging about 2008, and I used to have a really little tiny wedding blog, which I started because I was about to get married. And I had sort of done all this research, and our wedding was quite alternative, I guess. We got married at Spookers, and it was quite
nice.
Yeah, it was quite medieval themed as well, and it had all these horror elements and stuff. So I was trying to find, a red wedding dress and all these things. And so I kind of had all the stuff left over, and I thought, well, I read wedding blogs when I was working on this sort of project, and there wasn't really anything out there for sort of alternative people that was, quite dark. There's alternative wedding blogs, but they're quite like hippie, I suppose, sort of hippie and retro and vintagey oriented.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted something that was a bit dark, so I started that, and that was going actually really well. It was gaining some momentum, and then after about 6 months I realised I was completely out of things to say about weddings. I was completely bored with the whole topic. Like I even wrote an ebook, which was a wedding planner, and I was still, it's gaining some traction. I'm like, nah, I can't actually do this anymore.
Yeah.
So I loved blogging, but just not about weddings. So I started thinking, what would be a topic that what would be something I could blog about for a long time and not get bored of.
Yeah. And
I kind of came up with this concept of it being a bit like a magazine, a bit like a Cosmopolitan magazine or Clio magazine or something, where there's all these different sections of the magazine. There's feature articles, there's an advice column, there's a sealed sex section, which I don't have on my blog, but I suppose I could one day.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
There's there's like a bit at the beginning with all the reviews and things like that. There's all sorts of different types of articles about different subjects, but they all kind of come together under this one theme. Yep. And I thought, well, obviously the theme is heavy metal.
Yep.
That's who I am. But instead of just writing reviews and things like that, because I find writing reviews I'm not very good at it. Don't really enjoy it as much as other topics. So I thought I'd create this blog that was a little bit like a lifestyle magazine, but for metalheads and other sort of alternative people. So,
yeah, wicked.
So I started that in July 2009, which was about 2 weeks before I left for a 4-month sort of epic trip overseas.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later too.
And so the first sort of 6 months of my blog was a bit wishy-washy, because there was sort of 2 weeks with no updates, and then I was like, hi, I'm in Syria, whatever. Hi, I've just been to Varkin, and it wasn't quite perfect. But when I started it, I had 3 readers, and then when I came back from Europe and started working on it really sort of hardcore, I had it was hitting like 500 a month, maybe something like that. So it just sort of growing just a little bit, just without much effort on my part, really.
Yeah, cool.
And then when I got back, I started doing it and started updating sort of 3 to 5 times a week, and that grew it to about 50,000. Got about 50,000 hits a month.
Awesome.
At its height, and it dropped down a bit the last couple of years, and I'm scooting back up towards about 20 at the moment.
Wicked.
Yeah.
So what makes a good blog, do you reckon?
That's an interesting question. What makes a good blog? Well,
specifically maybe a music blog, I guess.
Yeah,
although I guess the core might be the same across different things.
Yeah, probably. I guess it's got to be engaging, which is quite a, it's a thing to say. Engaging is kind of a buzzword. But I mean, what that means is, you've got to hold somebody's attention from the beginning of an article or post to the end, and you've got to do that every single day. And how do you do that? It's kind of the $1 million question. I've always found, a lot of people use a blog a bit like a diary, and they just write, dear blog, today I did this, or such and such, and I think that's thoroughly uninteresting in a lot of ways, unless it's contextualised around something else. So, a lot of people write about, like I write about personal experiences all the time, but I try and frame them instead of just going, blah, here's what I've done. I try and frame them around things that would be useful or interesting for other people. So I might tell a humorous story or something because that, entertains people, or, I might say, well, here's, when I talk about our travels, I don't just say, well, we went here and did this. I say, if you go here are some things to do that are probably going to interest you because they interested me. And here's a little bit of history about them, and here's where you can go to learn more about them on their website or whatever. So, and I kind of try and frame it around the theme of my blog, which is that heavy metal kind of scene. So,
you do hear that a lot with writing, with anything on social media and that, but with musicians as well, as you want your website or your Facebook or whatever to be engaging and to get that interaction going.
Exactly. And blogs are interesting because they've changed a lot since 2008, 2009 when I started. And so when I started, social media wasn't really a big thing. And it certainly wasn't connected to blogs the way it is now. And so I would get 50 comments on an article, people saying, you completely just, I can't believe you think this is the best Black Sabbath album, that's the best Black Sabbath.
You're going to get that with metal, eh?
And that's fantastic, that's what you want, but that's what I used to get, and now I get maybe 2 or 3 comments. I've got more or less the same people are reading, but now I get hardly any comments, maybe 1 or 2 on some of the more sort of articles that people have a lot to say about, and then all of the interaction is done on social media. So people will read the article and then go back to Facebook and write their comment, or they'll read the blurb on Facebook, not actually read the article, which happens quite a lot, and then just make a comment on Facebook. So that's been quite interesting. But it's kind of I don't have a system really, or a strategy. I just kind of think, well, I'm talking to other metalheads, so it's kind of like talking to my friends. So, if I think my friends would find this thing interesting, then, my readers are probably going to, or, if I find this interesting, my readers are probably going to. So, that's why it's kind of...
It's your passion, eh?
Yeah, exactly. So, and with most people, which is, what I love talking to people about, what they're passionate about so much, even if it's not something I'm interested in, because if they're passionate about something, it comes through in writing.
Definitely.
And even if you're not a fantastic writer, if you really know about the subject, or you're really passionate about it, then then it becomes really interesting. Yeah,
for sure. What is the best Sabbath album?
The first one. Black Sabbath, without a doubt. Without that album, there wouldn't be metal. So it kind of just, to me, that whether, I don't know, technically or whatever, it's actually the best album or not, I don't think matters. It's just it's the album.
Good shit. So if someone's interested in starting a blog, say a music-based blog, but they're right at the beginning, what would you say? Maybe just the first couple of things to do, or first, looking back, maybe some important points that you'd start with. Yep.
Well, the first thing I did when I started my blog was I sat down and I thought, what am I going to write about? What's the sort of theme, of the site? And how can I kind of contextualize it? So I was trying to come up with the name, basically, because the name was going to be the whole concept of the thing. And I think this is the most important thing to start with, to kind of nail down that concept, because there are a gazillion, trillion blogs out there.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different if you want to write a blog for, just because, you want one that's kind of like a personal project, or if you want one to, kind of build it into this bigger thing.
Yeah.
And maybe make a bit of money off of it, or build it into like a portfolio so you can do something else. That's that second thing. That's kind of where I come from, because that's what I wanted from the start. And if that's what you want, you sit down, you think of the concept, because there's so many blogs out there. You've got to stand out somehow, and the way you stand out is having this really clear vision of what you want to do. You come up with that, you come up with the name, you come up with the sort of brand of the thing. Then you buy a domain. You don't mess around with, there's two quite popular free blogging sites, which is WordPress.com and Blogger.com or Blogspot.
Okay.
And you end up with a subdomain. So you end up with, I actually started on Steff Metal .blogger or blogspot.com.
Right.
And you don't do that. Don't mess around with free stuff. It costs you $10 a year to get www.steffmetal.com.
Yeah.
Start with that. I put self-hosted WordPress on it, which is like a blogging platform, and you load that onto your hosting site basically.
Yeah.
And that gives you everything you need to build the site from. You can start with a free template, which is how I started, and then on that it costs you about, I don't know, $10 a month for your hosting, $10 a year for your domain name. It's it's a very, very minuscule investment, and it's absolutely worth it to start with, because you're starting with something you can build on.
Yeah.
Whereas with a free site, you're starting with something that eventually you're going to want to shift over to something larger, and that's just kind of an extra hassle you don't need. So start the way you intend to finish, and then I guess the next thing, once you set that up, you set up a free template and you can hire someone to design you something awesome later, but start with that.
Yep.
And then, write yourself an about page, tells everyone what your site's about, and then start writing articles.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the gist of it. And the when you start, the really important thing to do when you start is just stick to a schedule. So even if that schedule is sort of ideally what you want really to build up a site is about 3 to 5 posts a week. For music sites, they have more posts that are shorter, so they have a lot of reviews which are maybe 300 words.
Yeah.
And they might intersperse those with interviews or something, or feature articles which are a bit longer. Blogs in different niches have, business blogs will often have sort of 3 articles a week, which are about 1,000 to 2,000 words long. So it's kind of a bit different. But music sites, usually the more you update, even if the updates are small, the better. And so you figure out a schedule that you can actually stick to, and then stick to it for at least 6 months. 3 posts a week, 5 posts a week, 1 post a week if that's what you're going to do. Stick with it for 6 months. Usually, even if you don't do anything else apart from write and post and reply to comments if you've got any, tie a Facebook page to it because it's easy.
Yeah.
Usually you'll watch your traffic steadily grow just because of search engines and people sharing it and doing a good job and being sensible about it.
Nice.
And that's really all it takes, and that's all that's all I ever did.
I guess the key point would be you have to do it, not just write down the schedule.
Exactly, you actually got to do it, and that's the hardest part. But that really is, if people say, what's the secret from going to 1 follower to, or 5 people reading it to 50,000 reading it, and that was it. It was just posting regularly, on a regular schedule. I did 3 days a week, and then I would often do an extra couple of things as well, and I did that for about a year, maybe 18 months, and then I kind of went a bit higgledy-piggledy on it.
Yeah.
But I'm at the stage now where I've got a built-in audience, and so if I'm not as regular about it, it doesn't actually matter so much. I've got the freedom now, you see.
Right, but you needed that.
You need that push
thing at the start,
at the beginning, and you won't get the audience growth until you could blog sporadically for 2 years, and you won't, and if you do it sporadically, like once a month here, twice a week, then nothing for 2 months and something else again, you won't see that until you sit down and do that regular schedule thing. And you do that 6 months to a year, and you'll see that traffic grow. And like if I was doing that now, if I could do 3 posts a week, I'd be growing again quite significantly, but because I just can't quite manage it at the moment.
Yep.
Give me 6 more months. Can't quite manage it at the moment. Yeah, I'm just kind of trucking along.
But that happens too, doesn't it? I mean, you're going to get times where life happens.
Of course.
And things come in. But the thing is that if you have that first and you know that you should be doing a schedule, that can come back as well.
Yeah, of course.
Just planting that seed, I guess. And
it's no one's, it's your blog. No one's gonna, send you to jail because you missed a week or whatever. But just having that schedule helps whatever I'm doing this week, I've got to write 3 posts.
Yeah.
So, and you don't have to. I mean, the great thing about blogging is you don't have to write them on the day you publish them. So I would always write mine usually on the weekend or on a Monday after work or something, all the ones for the week, and then I just schedule them through the week.
Yeah.
And that way it's all done, and it's just it's just a matter of replying to your comments or whatever throughout the week.
And so if people don't know how to do that, maybe just Google Facebook scheduling or WordPress scheduling.
Yeah, WordPress is WordPress.org, which is different from WordPress.com, which is they're both the same company, but WordPress.com is their free arm, so you end up with a subdomain. Whereas WordPress.org is what you want.
Okay.
And they have fantastic, really, really good tutorials and help, like some really simple layman. I know nothing about computers or anything like that really, and I could do it all. I set up my site myself. I loaded a template myself. I learned everything about using WordPress, and you can do things like you write your post, you set it up, and then just schedule it for a day in the future.
Yep.
Everything just from reading their help things. But the great thing about WordPress is because WordPress it's open source, so the actual software is free, and it runs they reckon about 10% of all the websites on the internet are run by it.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So if you have a problem with it, you just Google, I can't do this on WordPress, or how do I do this on WordPress? And you'll get 100 YouTube tutorials or whatever that's how to do it. That's why I like it. There's another really good platform which is quite similar called Squarespace.
Yep.
And the sites look really different to WordPress, but they can look really, really smart.
Yeah.
I've seen some really crap sites done with it, and some just super elegant, nice sites done with it. So, yeah, I think it's kind of better for. I haven't seen a music blog done on Squarespace, let's just say, but doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah. My cousin Aaron, who does a lot of my graphics, has mentioned them quite a bit. He says they're quite good, well, quite simple as well to use. I'd never heard of them until about a year ago when I ran a blogging workshop, and everyone in the workshop used WordPress except for this one guy who had this, the coolest blog. It was all about, he makes it's got a special word, but he makes his own salami, and goes and he goes out and shoots deer, and then butchers the deer, and then uses the venison to make these amazing salamis. And his blog was called Man vs Meat, and it was all these recipes for making your own bacon and how to butcher a deer, and it was just the coolest. Jeez, he sounds like a passionate dude. Yeah, he's really making salami in a proper way.
Yeah, he was awesome, and his site was amazing, and he had he was on the way to writing a book and building this huge thing. Like he'll be living off that site, I would imagine, in a couple of years if he pushed it real hard. Because it was just such a fantastic concept, and he had really fantastic photography, which is really important. And just the right kind of idea. And he was on Squarespace, and I'd never heard of it before then, but his site kind of, I was like, if I was starting now, I might consider them. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, you got a couple of books as well. I see. I was just looking up, and one of them involves zombie penguins.
Yep.
And one with cuddly kittens, which everyone loves, no matter how brutal you are. So, what are they called, and what was the process of writing those books for you?
Well, I always wanted. I mean, it's kind of pretty much every writer's dream is to, publish novels. Write their own fiction. And I spent, from the age of about 21 till about a year ago, trying to get novels published through mainstream publishers. And I got very, very, very close. I've written about 6 novels, and each one got progressively closer to being published. I had a contract at one point in time with HarperCollins, but then the editor that gave me the contract left, and they cut my cut my contract when she left. They cut a huge chunk of the authors.
Yeah.
So it was a bit gutting.
Yeah.
And the thing about mainstream publishing is you spend a lot of time sending out your manuscript going, "Ooh, look at this," and eventually someone says, "Oh yeah, we like this," and then you will wait 6 months for them to actually read it. And then if they give you a contract, it will be a year to 2 years between the time you get the contract, the time your book gets into the shops. And that's kind of annoying as a writer. You know, you just...
It's an understatement when you got your hopes up on something that you've put your heart into.
Yeah, and you want to get going. You know, you finished the bloody book. You want to see it in the shop. So and for the longest time, that was the only way you could really get things published. And then Amazon and Kindle and ebooks happened, and that kind of changed the playing field for authors. And for the longest time, self-publishing your work was a really like, oh, she's not good enough to get your, you know, to be published by a real publisher, you know. But now that stigma's practically gone. So I've been kind of following this for a little while, and I used to think, oh no, I don't want to self-publish, too much work, not with a real publisher. And then one day, I'd actually written a few ebooks, non-fiction ebooks, for some of my previous projects. So I had these sort of 4 ebooks floating around, little non-fiction things about like writing and wedding planning and stuff like that. And I used to read the blog of this guy named J.A. Conrad, who's quite a famous thriller writer, and he was traditionally published, but his publishing contracts were crap, and he went and published all his previous books that his publishers had said, no, we don't want this, it's not going to sell. Published all those on Amazon as ebooks, and was making like $100,000 a month.
Yeah.
And so he writes this blog which is all about how to self-publish your books, basically. It's like the blog to read if you're interested in that kind of thing. And so I was following him, and he issued a challenge one day. He said that, you know, a lot of authors I talk to won't publish ebooks because they think it's too hard. So I think people should learn how easy it is, so I'm going to issue a challenge. If you can write, edit, publish on Amazon an ebook in 8 hours, then I'll put every single one of those ebooks up on my website, and his website gets like thousands and thousands of hits a day, so it's kind of like a big, like, wow, that would be awesome. And I thought, you know what, that's not a bad idea. So I grabbed five of my short stories that I had lying around, some of which were previously published and some of which weren't, and I pulled them all together, re-edited them into this little collection. I downloaded a cover for $10 off of a stock website. I added a title page, and I had my first fiction ebook, and I published that on Amazon for 99 cents, and it sells not that many copies, but that's okay. So that book is called The Good, the Bad and the Utterly Screwed, and it's a collection of I call it 5 Tales of Weird Woe, and that's the book where there's a tale about zombie penguins and some weird neighbours and more zombies, lots of zombies. It's quite.
Sounds like it's a book about musicians.
It's quite an odd little collection, but it was really fun to produce. And you know, I've made back the $10 that I spent on the cover. Let's just say probably not much more than that, but I've made that back. And the thing about ebooks is that they're live forever. So in 10 years time, 20 years time, 30 years time, I'll still be earning money from this book. So that was my first book, and then I kind of got the bug. I'm like, ebooks are amazing. This is the coolest thing in the world. And so I've currently self-published on Amazon 3 of my old ebooks that I used to sell as PDF files through my website. So I've got 3 non-fiction ebooks up. I've got 2 more that I have to edit and put up, but it's taking a while.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I better start editing my novels and putting those up. So the first novel I published back in March, and that was called At War with Satan.
Yep.
And that is a full-length fiction book. It's a humorous fantasy horror satire thing. It's basically about metalheads fighting in the apocalypse.
Cool.
The reviews say it's absolutely freaking hilarious. Especially if you're a metalhead, if you're a musician, you kind of get it. There's a lot of drumming jokes in it.
Nice.
That kind of thing. And that was so much fun to do. It's so much fun to do. And so I have that you can buy that as an ebook on Amazon, on Kobo, on Smashwords, on iTunes for $2.99 US. It's not going to break the bank. Or you can buy it as a paperback from Amazon and a few other places online for about like $15 US, which ends up being about $25 New Zealand by the time it gets here. But that's not, it's not even that bad.
No.
And if you ever talk to me, I'll sign it for you. And maybe it'll be
awesome.
worth something one day. So I did that. And I loved doing that. That needs a the editor I hired to do it wasn't as good as I would like, and so we're going over it. I'm going over it again at the moment with another editor, and we're going to re-release another version which has got a few of the little typos, little errors in it fixed. Again, that's the cool thing about self-publishing, you can do that.
Yeah.
And then next month I'm publishing the first book in a fantasy series. It's called The Sunken, and this is the kind of stuff I write all the time. It's not really funny, it's very dark, it's sort of alternative history. It's set in a alternative history Georgian London. It's a Georgian London where dinosaurs never died off, so there's big T-Rexes running around and lots of steam powered this and that, and it's really fun, but it's very, very dark. And there's 4 books in that series. The first 3 will be released this year, and the next one will be next year. So that's kind of my big project at the moment. And a huge part of what I'm doing to blog right now is sort of trying to promote these books. So my focus is sort of shifted slightly away from music related writing and more on to trying to build an audience for my actual books. But
metal's in your blood though. I don't suspect that'll go away for long, eh?
Oh hell no. And there's a sequel to At War with Satan in the works, which is metalheads helping Odin battle in Valhalla, so that's going to be kind of interesting.
Okay, I'll check it out. Awesome. We were talking before too, very briefly before we started the interview, about you have a chromatopsia, and tell us about it.
Okay,
what is it?
A chromatopsia is quite a rare genetic eye defect. I think it's a chromosomal thing. So it's genetic. I was born with it. It just means both of my parents have 2 sets of recessive genes that kind of came together in a weird kind of way. My eyes have no cone cells, so you have two types of cells in your eye, the rod cells and the cone cells, and sort of in a very untechnical way, I've got the rod cells, which is what helps you see at night, and they activate at night, but I don't have the cone cells, which is how you see during the day. So I'm kind of got my night vision on all the time. And what that means is, one, I can't see in colour at all, see no colour whatsoever. 2, I am extremely light sensitive, so for instance, we're sitting out here in the middle of the day and it's nice and sunny, and I kind of have my eyes closed most of the time because the glare is just so bad. And that's just life. I wear very dark red glasses because it acts as like a polar filter. And with a chromatopsia usually comes other related conditions, and so one of the related things I have is I have nystagmus, which is where my eyes wobble a lot. They're larger than a normal person's eye, and so I'm always and they wobble, and I'm always looking out of the side of my eye, the bit that wobbles the least, which is why often when people talk to me I'm making eye contact with them, but it doesn't look like I am. And I'm severely short-sighted to the point where I'm legally blind, so I can't ever drive a car or, I don't know, fly an airplane, or that's about it really. Yeah.
So you'll have to be a passenger on Ed Force One rather than the co-pilot.
Yeah, can't be a co-pilot.
Have you found that? I mean, does it play any part in what you do, or has it had any positives at all?
Oh, well, it's an interesting thing because, and it's probably different for people who lost their sight throughout their life, but because I have always had this condition, and it's a stable condition, so it will never get better, but it will never get worse. It's just a part of who I am. It's kind of like asking if having brown hair has had an effect on me. Like, it's just like it's kind of part of who I am. It's because I have wonky eyes and I'm a little bit weird, well, a lot weird probably, and because I have wonky eyes I can't play sport very well, things like that. I dealt with a lot of bullying from the age of about 5 to the age of about 16, 17. And that has a profound effect on you, probably more than actually having the eye condition itself.
Oh, yeah.
But that kind of, it's not to say that if I could see perfectly well, I probably still would have been weird, so,
Good.
So, yeah, I don't know how much of that's actually got to do with, the condition itself. It's annoying not being able to drive, but, yeah, it's life.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The reason I ask is because, I mean, we've all got something. Everyone's got something.
Yeah.
And I think attitude makes a massive difference. So maybe I'm wrong, but you could have quite easily been a lot more woe is me about living with a chromatopsia.
Yeah.
Which probably wouldn't have seen you right as much as you have.
No, probably not. Or done a lot of the other things I've got to do. I mean, I'm just a bit, I don't know. I don't want to sound all I don't know, Dr. Philly or anything, but there's so much interesting stuff out there to go and do and see and experience and taste and touch and whatever, and I don't really want to miss out.
Yeah.
And I'd always been like that. I never wanted to miss out, and so, and I don't like wasting time because I don't have an infinite amount, and any time I spend sitting around feeling sorry for myself, is time I could spend doing stuff.
Yeah.
And you always kind of think things like, there was a dude that had no legs and he climbed Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And if a dude with no legs can climb the highest mountain in the world, then I can do whatever it is that I'm struggling with that week. And
exactly.
Yeah, and it just, there's no benefit to feeling sorry for yourself. So.
And that's very sensible thinking, and it's something like I kind of hope that people that will listen to the Music Talks interviews, especially the musicians, really get in their head. Because I mean, it's easy when you're a musician. It's still like writing or anything. You've got your passion, and you're working so bloody hard on it, and you do get these setbacks. But the thing is, it's going to come down to how you think about these setbacks. So. If you think, I can't do it because of this, or here we go, they're judging me because I've got this condition again, or this and that. I mean, it's probably more your thinking than anything else anyway, and it's going to hold you back, isn't it?
Exactly, and, you never fail until you quit,
Yeah.
Every single person that's made a success in anything they've ever done, they got lucky, but luck only happens to people that are in the game. You're not going to get lucky if you're not in the game, and that's it. It's just, you create the best thing that you possibly can, and you put it out in the world, and you give it the best chance you possibly can, and then you do it all over again, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and eventually something's going to stick.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't stick, then you haven't been working long enough, and that's that's basically it. I'm not rolling in money from my little silly book about metalheads and the apocalypse.
But you're doing it though, aren't you?
But I'm doing it, and I'm doing it again and again and again. And it's the cumulative effect of, when I've got 20 books on the market, if they're only selling, 100 copies a month each, what's that, 2,000 books a month? $2 a book I earn in royalties? That's not a bad life.
Yeah. And doing what you want as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So talking about those musicians and that, what do you think of New Zealand metal at the moment? And what do you think that metal fans in New Zealand, as well as the musos, can do to raise the bar a bit?
Well, possibly, and this is because I'm an eternal optimist, I think it's never been a better time to be a musician in this country. And the huge reason why is because now more than ever before, it's very clear, that it's very obvious that if you're putting out high quality, awesome music, it doesn't matter where you come from. And that has never really been, New Zealand has always had this problem that the metal scene worldwide is in Europe and to a lesser extent America, and it's not here. And there's only so high you can go until you've kind of hit the bar in New Zealand. But now we're seeing bands like Beast Wars, we're seeing bands like Ulcerate, Exordium Moors to a certain extent, Diocletian, I think they sold something like 10,000 copies of their last album in Germany. I could be wrong about that, but, that's insane. And all these bands come from here. How amazing is that? Little bands from New Zealand. The Beast Wars, whose album was, in every single metal magazine or blog's top 10 last year. A little band from New Zealand. All they did was they kept producing what they loved. They put it out there, they packaged it incredibly well, and they made sure it was seen.
Yeah. And even on a grassroots level, I reckon, I just relate to when I was playing in the late 90s versus now. I think there's way more grassroots death metal, especially club shows, than there was back then. There's a few on every weekend.
Exactly. We've got so much choice. For me, I was always a big fan. I was a big fan of sort of the less extreme stuff, like power metal and traditional metal and stuff. And when I first came to Auckland, there wasn't a lot of that on the scene. And now there's a lot of bands playing that kind of style. It's really cool to see a lot of diversity, and diversity in the shows as well. You go to one show and there'll be a thrash metal band, there'll be a black metal band, there'll be a death metal band, and then there'll be Stormforge or something. Also I think seeing a lot less sort of high derivative music in the scene. I used to feel like I'd go to shows and I'd just be watching 5 Pantera wannabe bands in a row, but to me, people are just getting more, there's so much to be inspired by. I'm finding, a lot of the music nowadays is just really, coming from this country is really imaginative, really original, and that's what's going to pull people above the bar. I think it's a fantastic time to be writing and producing your own music in this country.
So maybe more than ever, what you're saying is originality is one of the key things, is what's going to get bands out there anyway. Yeah,
definitely. And it's just having your own sound. So people can listen to a record and they say, I know what this is. This is blah blah blah. The new Exordium album is a prime example of that. I've been a huge fan of that band for years. And
great guitarist.
Yeah. And they're just, that's just an incredible piece of work. And you listen to that and you're like, this is, they've got a sound. They've got a signature sound, a sound that's just theirs. And you're already starting to see people sit up and take notice of that. So
yeah, it's one of the things I always say to my guitar students is you go through the stages of copying, and you kind of need to do that, of copying your idols, and you want to get the same amps as they have and everything. But after a while, you start to realise no matter how good you get at copying your idols, if you do it perfectly, you still end up a clone of that person, pretty much, you know. So probably the same with bands. You go and see them, they could sound exactly, you know, as good as Pantera and everything, but if they're just cloning them, they're still going to get compared to Pantera, or people are just going to say they're great, but they kind of sound the same as Pantera. So if you can take that skill and do your own thing with it, you are you're your thing. Kind of like with your blogging, you do your passion. Exactly. And so it comes out.
And I mean, I started as a writer very young who copied. Writers do it as well. You know, I copied. I was reading a lot of like Goosebumps books and R.L. Stein and that kind of thing. You know, and that's what that was a huge part of what the first books I finished when I was 14, 15. That's what they were like. They were just clones of that. But then you develop your own style and you figure out what you want to do. And my husband always says, he's a musician as well. He always says, if you want to sound like Iron Maiden, don't listen to Iron Maiden. Listen to what Iron Maiden were listening to when they were creating what Iron Maiden is.
Yep.
And you go back to the roots of what you love, and you listen to what was inspiring them, and let it inspire you. And then, instead of becoming highly derivative, you end up kind of collecting those various influences, and that kind of is where the seeds of that sort of original "this is what I am" sound comes from.
Yeah. Plus you get a bigger appreciation, I guess, of all the different bands that are there as well, instead of just going, oh, this latest band is the one that changed the world, kind of.
Exactly. Exactly. It's really, I mean, I remember when I first started listening to metal, I was a huge Metallica fan, as most people are, and it was kind of how I discovered other bands. Was I bought that Garage Inc. album, which is just a whole album of covers of songs that inspired Metallica, and I went, well, if Metallica likes these and I like Metallica, then I'm going to like all these bands. So I, went through old Kazar, remember that?
Yeah.
Downloaded, the whole back catalogue of Motorhead and Diamond Head and Budgie and Nick Cave, and discovered a whole bunch of new music just through figuring out what made Metallica what they were.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think you kind of mentioned it before. What are the positives of, say, the New Zealand music industry that you see?
Just that, mainly, that I think there's a huge scope now because of the internet, because of the way music, fans disseminate music. There's just such a huge opportunity for musicians here, which is what used to be the big downside when we were so far away from everything. Is kind of that gap's kind of narrowed a bit. But we have the advantage of being a little bit novel on a worldwide scene. Bands that break out of this country is still a little bit, the fact that they're from New Zealand is still a little bit of a selling point. I think Kiwis just have a unique worldview that kind of comes across in a lot of our music. Throughout, many different genres, you kind of get there's this kind of New Zealandery vibe that you get, and you're like, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
And it's, a little bit of it's that kind of small town, rural kind of vibe that you get. It's cool. I guess.
And, I mean, it's good to travel as well, because the thing that I noticed when I went to the US too is they did find that interesting that you're a Kiwi, whereas because you're a Kiwi and you're around Kiwis all the time, you go, why would you like my accent? Why?
Exactly.
So travel is good though for a band, and you've travelled, like you said before, to Vaken and Europe, and that's kind of one of the pilgrimages that a lot of us metalers want to do at some point. So tell us just a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I did it. We did it because it was you've got to do it before you die. It's metal mecca. You've got to do it. And it was actually our honeymoon. And I'm a bit of a, people who know me will know this. I'm very, very kind of hyper frugal. I don't like to spend money at all. And so if we were going to spend thousands of dollars on plane tickets to get to Europe, then we were really going to go to Europe. So we went for 4.5 months, I think, and we spent 2/3 of that camper vanning through the whole of Europe with 2 friends in the camper van to save money. That was was good.
Awesome. Road trip.
Road trip, yeah. And then we spent was it 5 weeks, 7 weeks going through the Middle East on a tour. And that was kind of amazing, but because I come from an archaeology background, it was a huge kind of life goal knocked off the list to see and experience a lot of those old sites.
Yeah.
And I mean Waken's just amazing. It kind of opens your eyes to what the whole world scene is like. And yeah, it's just we've been back once since the first time we went. We went 2009, 2011, and we're going back 2016.
Yeah.
And you just, once you go, you're like, oh my god, I have to come here all the time.
Is there a strong feeling of unity?
Yeah, it's quite something incredible. It's a lot different to here, I find. Although, in saying that, the New Zealand metal scene is getting a little bit more like the European scenes, I think, where it kind of celebrates diversity. Like, over there you don't, if you like extreme metal, you can like extreme metal and then like new metal or something.
Yeah.
Which you never do here. You'd never be like, oh, well, I kind of like Korn, and I also like Deicide or whatever. That never happens. But in Europe, you can have all that, and you can have some Blind Guardian or something on your stereo, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And it's just this intense feeling of belonging, I guess. It's all sorts of, people are just so happy to be there. It's just like this kind of big family. There's things like there's usually, I think it's 275,000 people. 3 to 5 days they're all hanging out there. Something like 250 ambulance, police, fire-related problems, which are mostly, like 95% of them, are people getting drunk, falling asleep in the sun and getting sunburned. And that's it. There's hardly any crime, there's hardly any vandalism.
Yeah.
It's just people having a good time, listening to music. It just kind of blows you away how amazing it is. We pulled up in our camper van the first time we got there, and we had no idea where we are or what to do or anything. And my husband gets out of the camper van and walks over to the next camper van and says to the two Germans that are there, hello, we're going to be your neighbours. And then those guys invited us over for some beers. They had other friends that were coming, so they introduced us to them. They took us all round, showed us the whole place, shared all their alcohol with us, and at the end of it, they give us big hugs and they say, this is Waken, this is the Waken family.
Awesome.
You kind of, and so those guys, every time we go to Germany now, they take us around Hamburg, hang out with us at Waken. We're mates forever now.
That's amazing, eh? That's what you need more of on a local thing as well. Just that sense of community and supporting.
It's I see it more and more now in the local scene, but it's quite different. It's funny things like was in the mosh pit with my friend John, and he was also got the same eye condition, and he's like, suddenly he goes, oh shit, I lost my hat, and he knocked his was going a bit crazy, and so someone had knocked his cap off, and he says in the middle of this German mosh pit, I've lost my hat, in English, and the crowd just goes like this, and two other people get on the ground to help him look for this hat, and we find the hat, gets the hat back on, and everyone's like, fucking, and that's what it's like.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all too.
No.
So, what are the things I guess you'd like to see changed within New Zealand metal, or the industry? Is there anything, as just looking at the music industry, where you think there could be a bit of improvement?
It's quite hard for me to say because I'm not really in the industry as much as other people. And like I said, I think it's going great places at the moment. I guess I get really bored of people slagging off other people's projects or efforts or whatever. It happens a lot between subgenres. This isn't extreme enough, or this is too new metal, or just things like that. And I think that's happening less and less over the years, actually, mainly because a lot of people I know kind of grow up a bit, something like that. Yeah, I don't know, but that's the kind of thing I'd like to see. It's nice to hang out in Europe and see the way they kind of respect everything. Like they've got that real kind of if it's metal, it's cool. I don't have to personally like it, but if it's metal, it's cool.
Yeah.
Whereas over here, there can be a little bit more of an attitude of maybe, it's not metal enough, or it's not, this isn't going to work, so, you suck or whatever. Don't see a bit less of that, but I don't know, it's just kind of an individual responsibility thing.
Yeah. And what advice would you have for... I mean, the one thing about metal is there's passion there. So even if, like some of us did when we were younger, Metallica cut their hair off. And you don't realise that you're actually judging someone for cutting their hair, which is exactly what you preach that you don't want happening to you.
Do, yeah.
But so it is very passionate in general. What advice would you give someone starting out who is wanting to live their passion like you do? You do what you love with your blogging and with your writing. So what advice would you give someone who wants to do the same kind of thing?
I don't know, it's... For that kind of attitude, I guess, the big thing for me was I never spent a lot of time arguing with people about why I should do what I wanted. I just went and did it. So... and maybe I got lucky because I never spent a lot of time arguing with my parents about whether I should wear black t-shirts or whatever. I just wore them.
Yeah.
And I never spent any time sitting around on the internet talking about why I had the right to do this or the right to do that. I just did it or didn't do it or whatever. So I guess the thing is, if you want to do something, don't talk about doing it.
Yeah.
Just go and do it. Talk about it when you've done it. There's very few excuses these days. People say to me, because for instance, I'm going to Peru next year, for a month to travel around and explore that country. And a lot of people, I'm going to climb Machu Picchu, and a lot of people are saying to me, that's amazing, I've always wanted to do that, that's like my dream, and it's never going to happen. And I think, well, at the end of the day, it costs you what, $2,000 for a plane ticket and $500 to get up the mountain? If you really want to do it, just save $25 a week for 100 weeks, for 2 years, and you get there.
Yeah.
There's very few excuses these days. So don't make yourself excuses. Just figure out a way. Don't say I can't learn to play the guitar like Satriani, so I'm not going to start. Or I don't know, I can't do this, so I can't write a novel, so I'm never going to try. Or just make a start. It's all it's all little tiny. Every novel, every 100,000 word novel that you write is just 1,000 words 100 times.
Yeah.
So get started on that 1,000 words.